welcome to Dolly Talk. This is Dolly. How is everybody doing? Hello, boom. Supposed to say first. And I was on time. How are you doing, Mads? Hope you're well. All right. So we have the wonderful Brian Camp, the young 2A fan, on time-ish. And he got into a little bit of a pickle. And somebody broke in who hooked up with his girlfriend when they were on a break and tried to kill him. Right now, he is on the stand. We are going to pick off with his cross-examination. Woohoo! Okay, so yeah, we just started the exam yesterday. It'd help if I showed on screen. Hey, Factual Lie. How you doing? God, it's so weird to be streaming at 5 p.m. Eastern and nobody else is on in this time slot.
In the cabinets, but you said it was up above the cabinets?
Yes.
So showing you exhibit number 23. Keep doing that, excuse me.
Yeah.
Exhibit number 23. You've got these suspended or elevated cabinets, correct?
Yes.
And you testified, I believe you told the police during your interview that in order to reach up there to get the firearm, you actually had to climb up onto the countertop to reach. Am I right?
No, I was referring to something else.
Well, when they asked you where the 6-hour came from, you said that it was up above the kitchen cabinets, and to get above the kitchen cabinets, you've got to climb up on the countertop. Am I right?
If you needed both your hands to carry the object and hold the object, you would need to climb onto the counter, but you can reach the top of the counter standing. I can reach the top of the counter standing, top of the cabinet.
That's your memory of what you told the police?
Yes.
And you knew heading into that kitchen area which cabinet top your 6-hour was stashed on top of?
Yes.
And how did you know that?
Because that was a common place for it to be.
So who would commonly put your 6-hour on top of the kitchen cabinets?
Objection.
Well, he had his gun under his bed, I'm sure. Next to an open safe with some cocaine in it. Next to the Baldo. Oh God, this could be Nick Rekieta in 20 years. He kind of looks like Nick Rekieta in a way. Maybe not.
All right, you can rephrase your question.
Thank you. How did you know where your 6-hour was in the kitchen?
It was a common place for it to be.
Okay. Had you put it there last?
I do not know.
Which countertop or which cabinet was it stashed above? Can you point it out for us, please?
Excuse me while I look this out.
Not the first cabinet door or the second, but in line with above.
Definitely not Nick. This house looks like the cabinets all have their doors, so I was mistaken.
Third cabinet door.
So you're talking like over here on the right, sort of above where the Tostitos
Although it is just as messy.
are?
Roughly.
So your testimony is that when you were cornered in the kitchen, you reached up above this countertop here Right abouts in the area where this crock pot is and this smiley Halloween-y type thing?
Yes.
You're saying that was a common place to stash your Sig Sauer.
Yes.
And you were able to reach all the way up there from the floor is your testimony.
It's asked and answered, Judge. Objection.
I'll let you have it.
That's your testimony, sir?
Yes.
And you don't.
Dude, wash your windows too. I mean, yikes.
Roughly.
So your testimony is that when you were cornered in the kitchen, you reached up above this countertop here,
Those
right about
cockroaches
in the
there.
area where this crock pot is and this smiley Halloween-y type thing?
Yes.
You're saying that was a common place to stash your Sig Sauer.
Yes.
And you were able to reach all the way up there from the floor is your testimony.
It's asked and answered, Judge. Objection.
I'll let you have it.
That's your testimony, sir?
Yes.
And you don't recall telling the police you had to climb up onto the countertop to reach there?
I do recall saying that.
So once you get the Sig Sauer down from on top of the cabinets, it's already loaded?
Yes.
It's got 10 rounds in the magazine?
Unsure.
Good to see you.
Well, fully loaded?
Unsure.
With hollow-tipped rounds?
Yes.
You had loaded those into the weapon, correct?
Yes.
You shoot Mr. Latender in his torso, correct?
Yes.
So you're holding...
Mr. Latender. I don't know. The name sounds weird. And I love how prosecutors, it's always those hollow point bullets designed to kill and maim. Unless it's Full Metal Jacket, then they're those bullets that are designed to pass through someone and can cause more damage to somebody else. You're always negligent no matter what ammo you use.
the gun. Am I right? Were you holding it with your right hand?
No.
So you're holding it with your left hand.
Correct.
Are you left-handed?
No.
Which hand did you use to fire it?
My left.
So you shot with your left hand,
Yes.
even though you're right-handed.
Yes.
Why is that?
I grabbed it with my left hand.
Okay. So you reach up. So you're facing Mr. Latender. You reach up. You grab it off the top of the counter, the cabinet, with your left hand.
Yes.
You bring it down with your left hand.
Yes.
And how do you point it? How do you shoot?
I removed the holster with my right hand and pointed it at him and shot him.
So you had the time to take the firearm out of the holster, but you didn't then transfer it to your dominant hand?
I had the holster in my other hand.
And you shot him with your left hand?
Yes.
And where was he, how was he oriented to you?
He was facing me.
Facing you. Okay. So he's facing you and you shoot him with your left hand.
Yes.
You say he fell to the ground on his back, am I right?
Yes.
And he didn't bounce back up, am I right?
Yes.
I'm right, he did not bounce up.
Yes.
Okay. Was he moaning at that point?
Yes.
Was he moving in any way?
Yes.
How so?
He was moving his arms, his legs, his entire body. He was changing position from his back to one side to the other, onto his stomach, all in a very short.
Half Irish, that is a very good point. If I can, once it shows up here, his right hand was kind of broken. So, yeah, I'm not surprised he was, doing old southpaw. Yeah, you're right. Okay. So, yeah, that's not, that makes sense now.
Period of time
But he never regained his feet.
at that moment.
Fair to say he was squirming on the ground,
Yes.
squirming and moaning,
Yes.
and bleeding?
I don't know.
You didn't see any blood coming out of him at that point?
No.
And your testimony is that at that point he looked at you and said, did he say that he would need a lawyer or you would need a lawyer?
He said the words, "I need an attorney."
Meaning he needed an attorney.
Him.
But then he said, I'm going to kill you, meaning you.
Yes.
So at that point, with him squirming and moaning on the ground, you left the kitchen.
Yes.
And when you left the kitchen, you walked away from him, turning your back to him, am I right?
No.
No, you backed out of the kitchen?
I maintained looking at him as I got out of the kitchen.
And which way did you get out of the kitchen?
I stepped sideways along the counter.
This countertop here?
Yes.
So you're saying you basically backed away from him by walking in this photo from toward the right,
Yes.
through the little alcove underneath the stairs?
Yes.
And at that point, you went outside to check on Brooke.
Yes.
So is it fair to say that when you left him in the kitchen, moaning and squirming on the ground with a gunshot wound, you felt as though you had neutralized the threat at that point?
Yes.
So much so that you left the house with the girl still upstairs. That is what you did, correct?
Yes.
And when you left Mr. Latender, whose name you didn't know at the point, right? You didn't know who it was.
I did not.
When you left him in the kitchen, you left the shotgun barrel that he had been holding at some point right on the floor next to him, am I right?
Yes.
Showing you here in exhibit number 23, you'd agree with me that it's lying in this photo to the right of his body, correct?
Yes.
And he had used that during your struggle with him as sort of as a weapon or a club?
Yes.
Struck you with it?
Yes.
And you left it right near his squirming, moaning body.
Yes.
You also left your loaded revolver on the countertop right next to Mr. Latender.
Yes.
And you left him in the kitchen alone.
Yes.
After you go outside to check on Brooke, you then go back into the house, am I right?
Yes.
Where's the 6 hour at this point?
I have the 6 hour.
Okay. You never put it down on the rail, did you?
I don't believe so.
So you lied to the police about that.
It was unclear at the time.
Well, did you say I'm unclear, or did you say, yeah, I put it on the rail and I believe it left it there the whole time?
That was my memory at the time.
You go upstairs, you poke your head into the room where the girls are, correct?
Yes.
You put some pants on at that point.
Yes.
You then bring some items outside to Brooke, am I right?
Yes.
What did you bring her?
Shoes.
Okay. And again, you're leaving the house. Girls are upstairs. Mr. Latender's still in the kitchen, correct?
Yes.
You hadn't gone back into the kitchen to check on him to make sure he hadn't gotten up, am I right?
Correct.
How many times did you go in and out of the house before the police got there?
I don't know.
So you've gone into the house to get some pants on, correct?
Yes.
You left the house to bring Brooke some, was it boots you said?
Shoes.
Shoes. You go back into the house now. Now you're back in the house. And you decided not to scoop up the girls and leave the house, am I right?
Yes.
And there were multiple vehicles in the driveway, am I right?
Yes.
Okay. And you had the keys, or you had access to more than one vehicle in the driveway, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you did not scoop up the girls, leave the house.
Can I see council sidebar?
Exactly.
What you did grab when you went back inside the house was your cell phone, am I right?
Yes.
And you picked up your phone thinking you should probably call somebody at this point, am I right?
Yes.
And did you sort of go through some options in your mind in terms of who might be a good person to call at this moment?
No.
You pretty much had made your mind up.
Yes.
You thought it would be good to call your boss,
Yes.
and his name is Brian Campidelli, somewhat coincidentally.
Yes.
Okay. And you called Brian Campidelli, spoke with him for about 2.5 minutes.
Yes.
You told him what had happened.
Yes.
And did he give you some advice over the phone, or not until after you'd hung up and he started texting you?
Through text message.
Okay. And one of the text messages he sent you in which you read was, make sure you take some pictures for evidence of your own, correct?
Yes.
And you read that advice, am I right?
Yes.
You thought about that advice?
Yes.
You decided that was good advice?
Yes.
Then you decided to follow the advice?
Yes.
So you were into evidence collection mode at this point, fair to say?
Objection.
I mean, you can have that.
Yes.
The first photo you took with your cell phone was of Jonathan Latender lying on the floor, am I right?
Yes.
Showing you exhibit number 68, you agree with me that this is the picture that you took with your cell phone?
Yes.
And in this photograph, you'd agree that Mr. Latender is now lying face down on the ground, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
He's holding his left hand to the back of his head, correct?
Yes.
Did you ever see the gashes or wounds on the back of his head?
I did.
You did. Showing you a picture that was taken during his autopsy. And is that the location and the appearance, give or take, of the wounds you saw on Mr. Latender's head that night?
Yeah.
Objection, may we
He's
come?
about to answer, Your Honor.
There's an objection, so let me see the sidebar.
Prosecutor. He's about to answer. Yeah, that's a good time for an objection, Princess. Mads, good question. I'm gonna look it up. So, Massachusetts. Up to 20 years, it looks like.
Sir, let me clarify a little bit. You testified that Brooke, your girlfriend, had struck Mr. Latender over the head with a glass bong, correct?
Yes.
and that cut his head,
Yes.
and he started bleeding.
He smokes the devil's lettuce. Guilty. He partakes in the marijuana. Oh, no. Now he's double guilty.
Yes.
Okay. And during your interactions with Mr. Latender that evening, you saw him bleeding from his head?
Yes.
You saw the wounds on his head?
Yes.
And showing you this photograph, is this not only the location, but the appearance of the wounds that you saw on his head?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move to admit this, please.
All right. That will be our next exhibit.
With no
Exhibit
objection.
number 85.
Thank you. Your Honor, may I publish it to the jury?
You may.
Explain it.
Marijuana? Marijuana. Mary Jane?
Now, when you took this picture of Mr. Latender on your cell phone, Exhibit 68,
We're going to get
was he
Exhibit
moving
69?
at this point?
No.
Was he speaking?
No.
After taking this picture, you then left the kitchen again, am I right?
Yes.
You did not move that shotgun barrel.
No.
You did not move the loaded revolver.
No.
You once again left Mr. Latender in the kitchen near those items.
Yes.
You then went upstairs to continue following Mr. Campidelli's advice, am I right?
Yes.
And that's when you took the 4 other photos that are shown in Exhibit 84, am I right?
Yes.
You took a picture of your bedroom floor, the linoleum tile in your bedroom, the entrance to the girls' room, and the hallway, the stairwell, correct?
Yes.
And do you remember the order in which you took those photos?
From the picture of Jonathan
Yes.
to up the stairs. And then the pictures of my bedroom, then the picture of the girl's door is my memory.
Okay. Would you mind, please, just putting numbers next to each photo in terms of your memory of the order in which you took them?
Objection.
No, you can do that. You may have that.
All set? From the moment you snapped the photo of Jonathan Latender on the floor, how long would you say it took you to go upstairs, take these 4 photos, and then come back down?
A minute.
Okay. So 1 minute for the taking of the 5 photos, fair to say?
Yes.
And I believe your testimony was that while you're upstairs taking photos in your bedroom and in the hallway and in the stairwell, Mr. Latender is still downstairs. You don't have eyes on him at this point, correct?
No.
And Brooke is outside. You don't have eyes on her either.
Yes.
Your testimony this morning, correct me if I'm wrong, is that after you took the 5 photos in that minute or so, you then went outside where Brooke was.
Yes.
And she was still on the phone with 911.
Yes.
And it was at that time that 911 dispatcher was asking some questions through Brooke, and you were answering some questions, a little bit of conversation there, correct?
Yes.
And that's when the dispatcher was asking some questions about where in the body was Jonathan shot. Do you remember that question?
Yes.
And you remember answering, I don't fucking care, dude, I don't know.
Yes.
And the dispatcher was asking some other questions about Jonathan's condition, correct?
Yes.
Did you ever hear the dispatcher say, I want Brian to go back inside the house and check on Jonathan?
No.
Did Brooke ever ask you to go back inside the house and check on Jonathan?
Yes.
Brooke asked you to do that,
Yes.
and you're saying that's on the 911 call?
I believe so.
And because she asked you to go check on the person who had tried to murder you, you decided to go inside and check on him?
At the request of the state police.
I thought you just said a moment ago the state police didn't ask you to do that.
She was communicating with the state police. She was in between me and the state police on the phone.
And so she told you, Brian, the state police want you to go inside the house and check on this guy?
She said they need to know.
They need to know what?
Thank you so much for becoming a member. Much appreciated. I usually stream around this time every day. I'll post a link if you're interested in joining the Discord.
Referring to the 911 operator's questions
Okay.
of his status, what he's doing, and where he may have been shot.
And at this point, you're outside the house
On the deck.
with your girlfriend,
Yes.
with your firearm,
Yes.
and you could have once again said, I don't fucking care, dude. You could have
Yeah.
said that.
Yes.
But you felt that you were compelled to go inside and do a check on him?
Yes.
Now, I'd like to ask you some questions about your decision to shoot Mr. Latender in the head. First off, you saw some photos and some testimony about a pair of handcuffs inside Mr. Latender's pants, correct?
Yes.
You never saw those handcuffs that night, did you?
No.
He never used them or took them out during your struggle, am I right?
Yes.
So when you decided to shoot him in the head, the handcuffs didn't play a part in that decision-making process, correct?
It was not a decision-making process.
Well, that wasn't my question. When you shot Mr. Latender in the head,
That was going to be your point on.
Yes, it was the question.
Well, hold on.
at the moment you shot him in the head, you had no idea about any handcuffs, correct?
No.
So that didn't factor into your shooting of him in the head.
It did not.
Similarly, with the decorative, or call it what you will, knife that was found the next day inside his jacket, you never saw that knife that night, correct?
Correct.
He never took it out, waved it at you, tried to stab you with it?
Correct.
So at the moment you shot him in the head, that knife really was not a factor in your mind.
Correct.
Now, it's your testimony today that Mr. Latender sort of was pushing himself up off the floor with his hands.
Yes.
And would you say it was from roughly his waist up that he was able to lift his upper body off the floor?
His legs as well.
His legs as well? So
Yes.
was he doing? So was it like a push-up that he was doing?
Yes.
So he was able to maintain, like his legs were straight, his body was straight, he was basically pushing himself up like a push-up.
Not a perfect push-up position.
It was a
I
girl's
believe
push-up.
from his knees down were still on the ground.
Okay.
Oh, wow. I was right. His knees were down.
He never made it back up to his feet, did he?
No.
Did you consider running toward him and kicking him in the head?
No.
Did you consider reaching him down, picking up that shotgun barrel that he'd hit you with, and just smashing him across the back?
No.
Did you consider driving your knee into his back and holding him down?
No.
Did you consider stepping on his neck and applying pressure?
No.
Instead, you decided to put him down, right?
Like a dog.
Well, when you had your Sig Sauer out, you had a number of places on his body where you could have shot him at that point, correct?
I did not have time to choose where I was going to shoot him. I just shot at him.
And are you saying you just happened to hit him in the head?
Yes.
Weren't you standing over him when you shot him?
No,
How close would you say you were?
10 to 15 feet.
Okay. So let's say this barrel here, Mr. Latender, okay? Are you saying, actually just stop me when I get to the distance. First of all, was this your right hand now?
No,
You shot him the second time with your left hand,
yes,
non-dominant hand.
yes,
Stop me when I'm at the distance you were.
about there.
So for the record, I'm just past the jury rail. You're saying that from this distance with your non-dominant hand, you point to the 6 hour at Jonathan Latender and you hit him in the upper top back part of his head,
Yes,
which would mean his head was facing away from you, wasn't it?
no,
Help me understand this. How was his head?
his head was, once again, in a push-up position. Push up, head looking down at the ground, roughly where your hands are.
Yeah, so if you fired from that distance and that angle, you would have shot him
Oh
in the
my
left
God.
temple, wouldn't you?
No,
What the? Wait, sorry guys. I was DMing Hella. She's having an issue with her stream or her internet. Wow. I have to go back a few seconds. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry, guys.
It hit him in the head?
yes,
Weren't you
Is this guy going to be the next expert witness for balls? If Hannah Gutierrez ever gets a new trial?
standing over him when you shot him?
no,
How close would you say you were?
10 to 15 feet.
Okay. So let's say this barrel here, Mr. Latender, okay?
There's nothing I love more than prosecutors demonstrating how easy it is to screw up with guns while they are prosecuting somebody for doing something wrong with guns.
Are you saying, actually just stop me when I get to the distance. First of all, was this your right hand now?
No,
You shot him the second time with your left hand,
yes,
non-dominant hand.
yes,
Because his right hand was
Stop me
broken.
when I'm at the distance you were.
about
Pointed
there.
at the judge?
Yes,
You shot him the second time with your left hand,
yes,
non-dominant hand.
yes,
When I get to the distance, first of all, was this your right hand now?
no,
Oh yeah, he flags the judge. He flags the judge there.
Shot him the second time with your left hand,
yes,
non-dominant hand.
yes,
Stop me when I'm at the distance you were.
Does look like the witness stand has bullet holes in
about
it.
there.
So for the record, I'm just past the jury rail. You're saying that from this distance with your non-dominant hand, you point to the 6 hour at Jonathan Latender and you hit him in the upper top back part of his head,
Yes,
which would mean his head was facing away from you, wasn't it?
no,
Help me understand this. How was his head?
Jesus Christ. What is this defense lawyer freaking doing? Do you know this is like your golden moment to humiliate this prosecutor in front of the jury? You just what is wrong with you? How are you this bad and incompetent?
his head was, once again, in a push-up position. Push up, head looking down at the ground, roughly where your hands are.
Yeah, so if you fired from that distance and that angle, you would have shot him in the left temple, wouldn't you?
No.
You'd agree with me that in the picture that you took of Jonathan Latender, let me pull it up again on the screen. Exhibit 68, I believe. You're saying that from this position, he started to do a push-up,
Yes.
and you were standing pretty much almost maybe where you took the photo from, correct?
Incorrect.
Oh, where were you?
I was on the
where were
other
you?
side of the dining room.
Oh, so you shot him from the dining room. Is this the first time you've ever said that?
No.
When did you say it before?
With meeting with my lawyer.
So you're saying that when you were speaking with the police for an hour and 8 minutes that morning, this is when you say you were having a hard time defining the 2 times I shot him.
Yes.
And at the time you were speaking with them at the barracks, your mind was just so jumbled that you couldn't remember standing 15 feet away from him and shooting him in the top of his head with your non-dominant hand? You had no memory of that?
Yes.
So you're saying that his eyes were looking down at the ground when you shot him?
Correct.
You told the police that you weren't sure if you'd shot Mr. Latender once or twice, correct?
Correct.
And that wasn't true, was it?
It is what I believed at the time.
You told police that if you did shoot him twice, it was in rapid succession. You remember that?
Yes.
And that wasn't true either, was it?
That is what I believed at the time.
So at the time you were speaking with police, you could not remember there being over an 8-minute gap between the time you shot him in the torso to the time you shot him in the head.
This shirt literally reminds me of when I was getting interviewed for a new position at GoDaddy. And I had to go to Walmart at midnight to get a dress shirt to come into work the next day because I was going to be interviewed. And that's like the shirt I got for like $10. My God, sir. That is the most weird, like... That's the shirt when you got to dress up for a promotion that, for a position that doesn't really require it. Yeah, I did for a year. I worked there for a year. It was something else.
Correct.
But you remembered everything else in between, didn't you? You remember going upstairs to get clothes on, correct?
Correct.
You remember getting some shoes for Brooke and bringing them outside, correct?
Correct.
You told them that detail, am I right?
Yes.
You told the police that you called Brian Campanelli, correct?
Yes.
So all these other details in that 8-minute and 37-second span, you remembered.
Yes.
And when they asked you about the second shot, oh, suddenly, jumbly, blurry memory?
Not suddenly, but yes.
The police specifically asked you if, when you went back into the house, you shot the gun a second time, correct?
Yes.
And you said you hadn't done that,
Correct.
and that wasn't true.
That is what I believed at the time.
So you believe that you hadn't shot twice?
I was unclear whether I had shot him once or twice, and I believed that if I did shoot him twice, that it was one event in rapid succession. That is what I believed at the time.
All right, so when you told the police that after the first shot you would put the gun on the railing outside on the deck, That never happened, did it?
If it did, it was brief when I went outside for a few seconds and saw Brooke, and then I grabbed it when I went back inside.
Right, but when you told the police you left it there, that wasn't true.
It is what I believed at the time.
So did you invent that memory?
No.
You told the police that you did not go back into the kitchen to check on Mr. Latender, correct?
I did not go back into the kitchen.
My question is, you told the police, they asked you, did you go back inside the kitchen to check on Jonathan? Remember them asking you that?
Yes.
And you said you didn't.
Yes.
And you're saying technically you didn't because you stayed 15 feet away from him as you shot him?
In a separate room, that was not the kitchen.
So you were parsing your answers? You had the mental clarity to parse your answers like that?
No.
You told the police that if you ever did something like he had done, you'd hope someone would put you down too, correct?
Yes.
So is that what you believe? You put him down?
No.
You didn't tell the police that after shooting Mr. Latender one time, you took photos of him, correct?
Correct.
Were you hiding that detail from the police?
No.
You told them that you'd used your phone to call Mr. Campanelli, correct?
Yes.
You didn't think it was relevant that you had taken a picture of dying Jonathan Latender with your phone?
No.
Why'd you hide that from them?
I did not hide that from them.
Sustained.
Did you think that you'd done something wrong by taking that picture and that's why you didn't want to tell the police?
No.
You never told the police that you shot Jonathan Latender in the head, did you?
I did not.
You never told the police that the two shots were minutes and minutes and minutes apart, did you?
I did not.
Toward the end of the interview, the police asked you if there was anything else you wanted to tell them, correct?
Correct.
Or anything else they hadn't asked you about, correct?
Correct.
This was another opportunity, another chance for you to step up and admit the second shot, correct?
Objection. Sustained.
Did you take that opportunity to tell them about the second shot?
No.
Sitting here today, do you agree that instead of shooting him in the head, you could have run over and kicked him in the head?
Objection. Sustained.
No.
You don't have to answer that question. It was sustained to strike that answer.
Sorry.
Sitting here today, do you regret putting him down?
Objection. Sustained.
Nothing further.
Any redirect?
No.
All right, sir. Thank you. You may step down.
Oof, no redirect. Let me see. Probably save this for tomorrow. Yeah, it was a very weak cross. No dark theme is crazy. I don't know. I don't really pay attention. Oh, what the hell? I'll start the defense closing or state closing. No, defense goes first. Because in Massachusetts, the defense goes and then the state goes. There's no rebuttal.
Brian,
So I'll start this. Hella does deserve time off. Avka, didn't the defense go first in Karen Reed? Could have sworn they did. I know there's a couple states like that. Hmm. Okay, yeah, defense went first. State last. Okay. So,
Camp was a self-employed evidence collector life and the life of his children and their mother. And thank goodness, for a couple of minutes, Brian Camp was a self-employed evidence collector at the suggestion of the replacement of his father, his boss, the male figure who he called. And thank goodness for that, because otherwise we would not have this photograph. I'm referring to I'm referring to Exhibit 68. We would not have that photograph because there were no state police there. And the reason that photograph is important is because it has to be compared to Exhibit number 4. That photograph. And there was some, I forget if it was insinuation or if it was a direct question about keeping these photographs from the police or whatever. If you go back, or when you go back and you look at his statement, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to see that at the end of his statement, they ask him if he will sign his phone over to them. These pictures were on his phone. He had taken them that night. The picture of Mr. Latender, if my memory serves, and by the way, my memory does not control, your collective memory controls, but my memory serves that that photograph was taken at 12:52 a.m. And when asked, I believe it was no, it wasn't Trooper O'Brien, it was the cell phone trooper. When asked if he had brought the rest of the photographs with him, no, we didn't bring those, just the picture of the body for some sort of nefarious reason that Brian Camp would take a picture of Mr. Latender at this point in the attempted murder of Brian Camp. No, we didn't bother to bring those to show the jury. And so I presented him with what we have, which is exhibit number 84, which is the series of pictures that Brian took that morning. That's what he took, not just a picture of Mr. Latender. So yes, he was engaged in evidence collection, thankfully, as was Ms. Samuelson, because the police weren't there when Brian took those pictures. With regard to the knife that wasn't found by the state police, they were there. They were at the house where that knife was ultimately found. And you'll hear, or you heard, the trooper, I believe it was O'Brien, say, when I asked him, well, what about the jacket? Didn't think it was important. Had no evidentiary value. There's a lot of stuff all over the house. Right now I'm referring to Exhibit 55. That's Exhibit 55.
God, it really pisses me off Court TV did not stream this whole trial. Like, it makes no sense why they would do it this way. And that was a pretty big, so the police missed the fact that he had a knife. Because I think if I recall, he took off his jacket and like put it down on their couch. And so then the police never found it when they left the scene.
The photograph taken by the police that night or that morning, there is his jacket right underneath a giant blood stain on the couch. How is that not important? Ms. Samuelson, thankfully, for a short period of time, was as an evidence collection person, thankfully, because you're now able to see the knife that was brought by Mr. Latender, a knife that is being described by the Commonwealth as decorative. The only difference between being stabbed with that knife and being stabbed with a non-decorative knife is those pretty pictures on the decorative knife would have your blood all over them. That's the difference. That was brought by Mr. Latender, and that was missed. That fourth point before we get into circumstances. At some point during this battle for his life, Mr. Camp, there were ambulances staged nearby the house. Staged meaning held back because they couldn't go in until the state police arrived. There were ambulances there waiting. It is not my purview to do read anything about the jury instructions. I'm going to hopefully be able to just take a couple of phrases out because one of the things that you're going to have to decide is whether or not Brian Camp was properly using self-defense and that the amount of force that he used was appropriate under the circumstances. And circumstances is the word that popped out to me as I was looking at them yesterday because there's one person in this building. There's one person I would suggest in this town, and I'll bet you there's only one person in this Commonwealth that experienced what Brian Camp experienced that morning, the circumstances that he was dealing with. You're going to hear the judge tell you regarding 4 certain things that the Commonwealth must prove weren't there. How the defendant acted under all the circumstances, and how a reasonable person would do in the same circumstances. So I would just like to review those circumstances as I remember them. And again, your memory controls, not mine. This was one event. This was one event that took place at 239 South Street. This was one event that was planned by Jonathan Latender. One event planned by Jonathan Latender to kill at least Brian Camp. An event that was planned by him, scheduled by him, and it happened in the early morning hours of the 27th of December, 2022. Didn't reach Brian Camp's schedule. Didn't reach those children's schedule. He scheduled for himself that this was the morning that he was going to kill somebody or everybody. And it was one event. It was one event that went from somewhere around 12:35, because we have the 911 call, which is established at 12:37. But that didn't happen right away. That call was made after Mr. Latender was in the bedroom and ended 19 minutes and some change later. That is the extent of the event. That seems like a very small amount of time in the grand scheme of things. But there's a reason why I ask certain people, have you ever been in a fist fight? Have you ever had some sort of wrestling match with somebody for any extended period of time? This was an event that had all kinds of different circumstances happening within it. It was an event.
All right, what do you think of Brian Camp's attorney? Hit us up on social media. Let us know. There's more to the defense closing arguments right after this.
Are you kidding me?
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julie Grant. We're going to go back to Massachusetts together in just a couple of minutes as we're covering the jealous ex shot dead trial. We're in the closing arguments. Per the Commonwealth rules, the defense goes first, the Commonwealth goes last. So we're seeing Brian Camp's defense attorney go first here. Now, while that's happening, I want to let you know about another major courtroom hearing happening today. There's interest.
I hate Court TV so much. I don't care about the Menendez brothers right now. Why? This is the right one. Yeah, they just lifted the feed. Okay, guys, I'm sorry.
He hid his car up the hill in the middle of the night, past the house, up the hill, so people inside would not see him coming. It continued, this event, for him when he walked up to the door. And of course, we don't know exactly what door it is. The state police are assuming it was the front door, but we'll give that to them. Let's say it's the front door. He walks up, Mr. Latender walks up to the front door. This event for him is continuing, and he walks up to the front door, and he gains entrance to the house where Mr. Camp, Brian Camp, is asleep, Brooke Janik is asleep, 2 little girls are asleep. Lets himself in the house, and he takes his shoes off. And ladies and gentlemen, picture this moment. The evidence has shown, circumstantially, that there was a moment in this morning where Jonathan Latender stood at the bottom of those stairs. With his shoes off. clearly intending to kill someone. And he started walking.
Well, no, maybe he's familiar. Maybe he's a fan of Japanese culture and he always takes his shoes off when he enters someone's house. No, he was being respectful. He didn't want to track any dirt in. He's a gentleman. See?
Up those stairs. Not to be known until something made a noise. You'll see that those stairs are wood. Probably a creak. I don't know. This was an event that started for Brian Camp shortly after Mr. Latender got to the top of the stairs. And here's how it started for Mr. Camp. Seeing a silhouette of a guy who we now know is 6 feet tall, 190 pounds, in his bedroom, and sets on Brian Camp almost immediately. Brian Camp is scrunched up, is scrunched up to the end of his bed as he's trying to get up and figure out what's going on. And this guy gets on him with his knees and grabs him by his throat and is choking him and slams his head into the wall. That's the introduction of Brian Camp to this event planned by Jonathan Latender, an event that took place for 19 minutes and change now for Brian Camp. That's the introduction. Criticism of and second guessing of decision making by Brian Camp throughout the 19 minutes and after. I'm pretty sure there's no manual that was ever drawn up on how to make decisions when this is going on. As a 22-year-old man who is 5'9", 145 pounds, is set upon by a very large man, well-developed, and the scariest part is not on drugs. He has no alcohol in his system. This happened without any help. This man was set on killing at least Brian Camp.
All right, we're going to pause this right here. You know I like to be totally transparent with you always, my friends. If you've noticed the sound on your TV or your phone, wherever you're watching, kind of going up at certain points, this attorney is putting his legal pad close to the microphones we have positioned, so that's why a little bit of extra noise is happening there. It's not within our control.
There's
but just
a lot
want to let
of
you know where it's
extra
coming
noise
from,
because you're
in case you're
talking
wondering.
right now.
But let's talk about the advocacy, if we can. I'm going to be totally honest. Lacking my legal analyst guest to get his opinion. Franz Borghardt watching along. All right, Franz, give it to us straight here. What do you think?
So there are a few times that a criminal...
Does that guy powder his head? Jesus. That is just... what in the hell? What in the tentacle hentai name? What is that painting? That is some creepy ass artwork there. Good Lord, does this guy know Kurt Eichenwald?
To this thing's victim, however, it man decides this harm still. And
they know the facts. And it's over who family Brian we got after.
Welcome to still doesn't know how this Boston police officer
Still don't care. There.
Muzzleloader.
I was not trying to shoot anybody.
What did you want him to do?
I wanted him to get out of the house.
And
This is
opportunity, what would he do?
Towards me.
They tricked me.
And so these circumstances begin. And in the bedroom, ladies and gentlemen, you start to see how the circumstances sort of start to pile up with regard to what's happening to Brian Camp and what's happening or not happening to Mr. Latender. And those are important with regard to what happens later on with regard to use of force and self-defense, and a statement given at the police station later on. He has jumped, his head is slammed into the wall, it breaks the wall, he's being choked, and Mr. Latender gets eventually smashed on the head with something glass. Brian Camp is under attack, and he is immediately physically under attack. And you know, there's the constant, we've had the constant mention of the fact that he was naked the entire time. And really the import of that is imagine the vulnerability of that moment when you are in your own bed and you have no clothes on and this guy is trying to kill you. And there's no clothes for the entire time. And it's important that the smash on the head of Mr. Latender did nothing. maybe loosened his grip for a second because Brian was able to get out and get behind Mr. Latender and try to choke him out with the rear naked choke around his neck, and to show the difference in size.
Yeah, the guy was asleep in his bed naked and wrestling with this other gentleman who broke into his house. I mean, it's a little awkward. Just saying.
Of the two gentlemen, specifically with regard to the fight itself, or the attack. He gets behind Mr. Latender and on his feet actually is able to get his arm around his neck. But that is not long-lived, ladies and gentlemen, because all Mr. Latender has to do is this, and Brian's feet are up off the ground, hanging on, riding this guy, trying to end this thing. He's trying to end this thing, but Mr. Latender is not going to have anything to do with ending this thing until someone is dead.
Phrasing, sir.
They both fall. And you've seen, and you will see the linoleum area where there is blood. Mr. Latender is now bleeding and getting it all over in his mouth and in his body, Mr. Camp. And the fight continues, and Mr. Camp is fighting for his life on the side, still trying to choke him. Mr. Latender cannot be stopped. This is where we see that Mr. Latender cannot and will not be stopped, because he is fighting from in front. He's fighting Brian behind him. He's grabbing for things, feels his eyes, and then, as Brian described to you, stuck a finger or two fingers between his eyeball and his eye socket.
He stuck
If
him
you've ever
somewhere
had your
else.
eye poked. Mr. Latender is not going to be stopped until somebody is dead. The circumstances continue, ladies and gentlemen. Brian is able to escape after almost having his eyeballs ripped out. And he runs downstairs. And he runs downstairs for a couple reasons. He runs downstairs to get this guy away from his children. And if there is criticism, I forget if there was criticism about that, but imagine trying to get two little girls out of their room at this point in this attack. He went downstairs. The safest place for those girls were in the room with the door closed, and he used himself as bait as Mr. Latender chased him down the stairs, where there is an open door that Brian allows him access to. You heard that he grabs the muzzle loader, that silver gun, and he turns himself and backs himself into the living room. Well, this guy comes down.
Don't.
Right there. He doesn't get the F out. He's not interested in getting the F out. He comes forward towards Brian Camp with this muzzleloader in his hand and is strong enough to grab the barrel of the gun and yank it out of Brian's hands. And then starts trying to pull the trigger as it's pointed at Brian. Brian recognizes this guy does not know how this gun works, thankfully, and actually positions himself again in a way to try to neutralize this guy. The guy still is trying to pull the trigger, and Brian pops whatever you got to pop on a muzzleloader, opens it up, and the primer, which is the thing that makes the bullet shoot, falls out onto the ground. Brian now knows that that gun is neutralized, that can only be used like the next shotgun is going to be used, but that is now on the ground, and the two of them fall onto the ground. Meanwhile, punches are being thrown by each of these guys, and if there was ever any doubt about what Mr. Latender's plan was here,
Core TV, is there something you'd like to share with the rest of the class?
they fall to the ground, both of them, and Brian gets another short-lived advantage. And you can hear on the 911 call, ladies and gentlemen, it's sort of a play-by-play of this whole thing as it goes along. Obviously, you can't hear everything, but you can hear as it goes along what is happening here. And in this part, you hear Brooke Janik say something to the effect of, Brian has him on the ground.
Right in the pause button. You won't miss a minute of the closing arguments. We'll be back live in Massachusetts after this.
Come on. God, I hate Core TV.
And he did. And if you remember his testimony, he had him sort of standing over him, trying to control his hands in this fight. He's on his back. Right above where they are is his jacket. And he's trying to control his hands long enough for the police to come. And this guy on his back is able to fight back from the floor, and then, in another example of his strength versus Brian Camp, from the floor is able to push his hands up and his legs up, and Brian's now lifted with him and onto the couch. I'm not surprised that Mr. Latender wanted to get onto the couch. That's why there's blood on that pillow. With his jacket right here, with the knife that the state police didn't find. Fortunately, and actually you hear Brooke say, I'm going further outside because Jonathan just got up. So he gets off of the couch and he's back up again. Brian now goes to the closet where there is this, hard to call it a shotgun, but he grabs this gun, again, points it at him. Again, as with the muzzleloader, he comes forward. He's not backing up. He's not saying, okay, bud, let me go. You know what? This is enough. I'm going to go out the door. I made a mistake. He comes forward, orders the shotgun, grabs the shotgun. It breaks in two, and now they each have a weapon. If this wasn't a manslaughter trial, this would almost be funny. This would almost be a funny cartoon situation where the gun breaks, and now they're both looking at each other. And Latender starts whacking away, as does Brian Camp. They're whacking away at each other because Mr. Latender wants to kill Brian Camp, and Brian Camp wants to live long enough for the police to show up, for the ambulances to arrive. And the best way he knows at that point, despite the fact that this guy just will not stop at this point, is with what he's got in his hand. And you hear that, again, it sounds like Brian had a little bit of an advantage in this situation because Latender is backing up as they're whacking each other, and then Brian says he hits him over the head with the stock. And the stock breaks, which gives him a shorter weapon. He says, this is no good. And does that stop Mr. Latender? No. And I'd invite you to look at the injuries on Mr. Latender's head. He's got some pretty significant injuries on his head. Back of his head. He's got cuts, he's got a gash. None of that stopped him. None of that was going to stop him. And so Brian starts backing up. And again, criticism of decisions made by Brian Camp under these circumstances. There's a reasonable person part of this. What would a reasonable person do in this situation? Brian Camp, I would suggest to you, ladies and gentlemen, is focused on this guy who is intent to kill him as he's backing up. The fact that he passes a revolver on the left-hand side, he's focusing on this guy. This guy is coming at him. Imagine trying to figure out the speed of what's going on. I would imagine, based on common life experience, common sense and life experience, which you get to use back in the jury room, you would imagine that this is taking forever, probably going in slow motion. Like, Brian's still trying to figure out what's going on. Who is this guy? And he's coming at me with this thing, and I got a gun up there, and pulls it down with his left hand because his right hand is broken. You see pictures of it. You heard him talk about it. A boxer's fracture speaks for itself, I would assume. And as this guy is closing, fires a shot. If this was a situation where Brian Camp wanted to kill someone, if this was a situation where Brian Camp intended to want to kill someone, or that this was going to be some sort of retribution killing or revenge killing, or that he wanted to shoot someone, which he didn't, but that he wanted someone to die, he would have gone like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. He shot once and got out. And down falls Mr. Latender. These are the circumstances that Brian Camp was in, where he is required to make decisions, literally life and death decisions. All the while, Mr. Latender just making sure to this point, Brian Camp has been choked, punched, head slammed into his own bedroom wall, knelt upon, fallen down to the floor with this guy in the battle, both upstairs and downstairs. He's got a broken hand. He's had to wrestle for a gun for his life. And imagine the psychological effect on the fact that this guy has the end of a gun in Brian's gut trying to pull the trigger. Imagine how exhausting, physically and mentally, at this point. And this lasts for 7 minutes and 43 seconds, that fight. He's got the kids to think about upstairs. He's got Brooke, who's outside, talking to the state police. Still no state police. Brian knows the police are coming. Brian wants the police to come. He knows they're coming. He wants them to come there to end this. He's not going to do a revenge killing, a retribution killing. Take pictures of it. When he knows and wants the state police to please arrive. Maybe Chesterfield. Could Chesterfield please arrive to end this thing? He's got an injured knee. You see the picture. He is getting the you-know-what beat out of him the entire way. Any sort of advantage that he got physically goes away very quickly because Mr. Latender overpowers him with his size and whatever it is that is driving him to want to kill Brian Camp. And he's been smashed over the head, Brian, with a gun barrel as well. And I suggest to you, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get to, when we get to the statement, you're going to hear, if you remember, or if you watch it again, in his statement, you're going to hear the state trooper say, if you've been through a traumatic experience, shooting someone is a traumatic experience. Shooting someone under these conditions is a traumatic experience. Mr. Latender is down on the floor on his back. And you heard that he was moving around. Whether it was writhing or not, he was able to move around. And I'd suggest to you that in Exhibit 68, you can see that there's evidence of his movement there. Both with, well, not necessarily with his hand where it is. There's movement. We learn about that later on with the second picture. But this blood swatch right here, that crescent shape, his hand went through his own blood and put his head on top, a hand on top of his head. He's moving. His leg is in an L shape there, his right leg. And he is telling Brian Camp now.
This looks like a young steel toe. That picture there.
And there was questioning to Brian Camp. You mean he meant you needed a lawyer? And Brian said, no. He said he needed a lawyer. Because of the multiple felonies that this guy has already committed and is continuing to commit. He's on the floor. He is still near the gun barrel, which is right next to him. He is near the revolver that is up on the cabinet or counter. He is near the set of knives which are on the counter as he lay there threatening to kill Brian Camp while he's moving. Brian now had okay, this guy is at least down on the ground, but he is still a threat, threatening to kill me. He's moving. Are the police here? No. So he starts to do whatever you got to do when someone is trying to kill you in your house for 7 minutes and 43 seconds, and now the event has slowed, hasn't stopped, the event has slowed. I would suggest to you, let's start with putting some clothes on. That's where he's been during this entire time. And again, criticism of a 22-year-old guy under these conditions, under these circumstances, as the judge is going to tell you. There are cars out in the driveway. You had the keys to them. Why didn't you take the kids out and go and drive them away? appears that so far has been the safest place for them. To bring them out into this situation, I think would be the bigger mistake. He made the right decision. And anyway, the police are going to be here any minute, so. Yes, he took a picture of me.
Closing arguments isn't about bringing up every little.
You don't think Steel Toe Morning Show isn't very entertaining? I mean, I think there's like 5% could be entertaining. The other 95% is spent begging for super chats and money, but you know. Oh God. So let's scroll. Consumer Cellular, scroll.
Or the other things, his children's bedroom door, to show you how close to his door it was where this guy broke in. The wall. You know, again, he's in evidence collection at that point. But he just sees that his handprint and blood is on the wall, so I better get a picture of that. The broken stuff in the room. He's trying to manage the situation, knowing the police are coming any minute. Listen to the dispatcher tell Brooke. They'll be there anytime now. They should be there. We sent them to you. They should be there anytime. And really, there's not any one, there's no criticism against any one officer. But this system, man, holy mackerel. Like, they're following what they're supposed to follow, apparently, and this is the result, which lends itself to what ultimately happens in this case, which is not a revenge killing. He knows the police are coming. He wants the police to come. He is doing what he's doing with the knowledge of that and with the hope of that. He wants this to end with the intervention of the police and the ambulance to show up again. But they're not going to be there for a while still, ladies and gentlemen. He does not leave the house. He goes out to the deck. That's as far as he goes. There were questions to him about leaving the house, and he jumped on it and said, you know, on the deck. He has his girls upstairs. He's got this guy who was trying to kill people in his kitchen, and he's got, hopefully, police on the way. And he shot a guy. What do you think is starting to happen to somebody's psychology with all of this stuff going on? A 22-year-old guy who was asleep 7 minutes and 50 seconds before, sound asleep. We know that he was shot in the left eye.
Oh my God, sir.
And we heard from the Commonwealth's medical examiner with regard to the injury. And I'm far from a doctor, and your memory rules and not mine, but we know what the injury was about because there was, as this case began, that this guy was incapacitated as a result of being shot. Oh, no. No. 750 milliliters of blood in his body cavity. We learned that that is the very beginning of what's called level 2 hemorrhagic shock. Very end of level 1, beginning of level 2. 15% of his blood body. The symptoms of level 2 hemorrhagic shock are anxiety and pain. Anxiety and pain. This guy now, whatever he's got going on in his head, now has anxiety added to it. And I started asking or questioning the medical examiner about his ability to move. And we made it clear that, yes, he could talk and he could certainly move his arms and he could move his legs. And then he started volunteering about this guy being able to get up on his feet and try to say that, that wasn't going to happen. But everybody's got a different tolerance of pain, correct, Judge? I mean, correct, Doctor? Yeah, everybody's tolerance of pain is different. Anxiety? Yep. Adrenaline? Yep. Pain tolerance is different for every person. We know what Mr. Latender's tolerance for pain was, and it was very high. Again, look at the photos of his head. Smashed glass on his head, choked from behind, punched either so hard or so frequently by Brian Camp that Brian Camp's hand broke. None of that stopped him. Knocked to the ground twice, hit in the head with a gun stock. The response to that was to come forward against Brian Camp after being hit in the head with a gun stock. Multiple times. None of that stopped him. His tolerance of for pain is very clear. It seems astronomical. Surely, Commonwealth wanted us to believe that he was incapacitated, not this guy. So now we have these circumstances set up where Brian is doing what he can best decide to do under these circumstances. The photograph he took of Mr. Latender is not up close. Right in the beginning, somebody went like this and said he snapped a picture like that. You've seen it, or if you haven't seen it, you can see it. It is from distance because Brian wants nothing to do with this guy at this point. Brooke is outside. Kids are upstairs. No police. No hint of police. No estimate of when they're going to be there to these guys. And Brian is doing what he thinks he has to do, waiting for them. And then at 12:40 of the 911 call, we hear the dispatcher start talking about Brian and checking on Jonathan. And I cross-examined her about that. And again, nothing
Stop reenacting Hurricane Helene.
personal against that person. She now is struggling because the state police are nowhere to be found in her job. And so here's what happens starting at 12:40 of the 911 call. And these are estimates by me, around 12:40. The dispatcher says to Brooke, "What is going on with Jonathan right now?" Brooke says, "I don't know, I'm outside." Dispatcher says, "Where is Brian right now?" Brooke says, "I don't know." Dispatcher says, "Did Brian just come back outside?" Brooke says, "He was popping in and out of the door because the door is open and he wanted to calm me down." Dispatcher, "I just want to know what Brian is doing right now." "I don't want you to go in the house," the dispatcher says to Brooke. Brooke says to Brian, "What are you doing right now?" And this is where you hear that there is this relay. Brian can sometimes hear, but Brooke is relaying the messages to Brian. He's putting clothes on. He was naked until now. And at 13:17, not as much of what she says, but the way she says it and stops herself. At 13:17, the dispatcher says to Brooke, once Brian puts his clothes on, the very next question, 3 seconds later, "What is Jonathan's status? Do you know?" Brooke yells to Brian, "What is Jonathan's status?" Brian says he's laying there moaning. The dispatcher says, "Ask Brian if Jonathan has a gunshot wound." Brian says, you can hear Brian say, "He most definitely does." Brooke says, "Yes, he does." The dispatcher says, "I want you and Brian to exit the home." Dispatcher says, "Are you and Brian outside?" Brooke says, "He's getting his shoes, I believe, and I don't have shoes on." She doesn't say, "Get Brian out of there." She says, "Can you ask Brian where in the body he shot Jonathan?" He's right there at the door. He doesn't want me to come up to it. Brooke says to Brian, "Where on the body did you shoot him?" To do with going near this guy. Brooke says, 14:15, they need to know. Dispatcher says, "Can you just ask him?" Brooke says, "I think he's looking." (14:40), Brooke asks Brian again, "Where did you shoot him?" Brian says, "I don't know, Brooke." He doesn't want to go in there. And I believe you can hear him say, "I didn't examine it."
No doubt this was an incredibly stressful and traumatic situation for Brian Camp. Is his attorney conveying this to the jury in the best way that he could? In other words, is his story...
Oh my God. Don't care. Don't care, still don't care.
Immediately physically under attack. And, you know, there's the constant, we've had the constant mention of the fact that he was naked the entire time. And really the import of that is, imagine the vulnerability of that moment when you are in your own bed and you have no clothes on and this guy is trying to kill you.
Oh, now walking the line right there. On the other side, the prosecution could have objected, arguably for a golden rule violation. You can't ask the members of the jury to put themselves in the shoes of one of the parties, the defendant or the victim. But
no. The self-defense is literally the only time you can argue the golden rule. Well, one of the only times. You literally have the benefit of asking the jury to judge would a reasonable person need to use self-defense in this situation. Good Lord, woman.
There was no objection, so it came in. Maybe the prosecution isn't worried. Maybe because this advocacy is so lackluster. Let's go back in. We hit pause.
See right now? No. I asked him where he shot him, and he wasn't sure. What's he doing right now? He's back inside. $16:20. Oh my God, I heard another shot. The dispatcher says, "You heard another gunshot?" Brooke says, "Yes, where are you guys?" "They're on their way," says the dispatcher, "and they don't show up for another 2.5 minutes. Didn't want to go near this guy. State police asked him to go near this guy. He goes at their request. And you heard him tell you what happened. This guy, who has done nothing but try to kill Brian Camp, is in his kitchen with this tolerance of pain. I mean, obviously, Brian didn't know about hemorrhagic shock and all that kind of stuff, but he's going in to check on his status for the state police, and as Brian says, he comes around the corner, and this guy is getting up. Nothing is stopping this guy. And you saw how Brian said it happened. He saw him, and boom. This guy was going to kill Brian Camp even after he was shot. Was it reasonable for Brian to think that's what was going to happen at that point? I think so. It's the only evidence that there was that that was what was happening. And you'll be able to see, ladies and gentlemen, that the reason the photo that Brian took, I mean, they're all important, but that's important because that was the position that he had left him in. And this is a picture of Mr. Latender by police when they arrived. And look at the positioning of his arms and how close that gun barrel was to him and where that revolver was and where the knives were.
We're going to talk it out.
Brian Camp had tried every means during this event to avoid this guy, to get him out of his house. He couldn't avoid the first attack. He couldn't avoid the first attack because he was just getting up and this guy was on him and choking him and slamming his head. But when he came to and he had the opportunity, the first thing he does when he goes downstairs is points a gun at him and says, "Get out." And he doesn't get out, comes at him. And again, ladies and gentlemen, when you look at the photographs again, when they were hitting each other over the head, and Mr. Latender was backing up, he backed up to a place where he was against the dining room slider, and that open door was straight over there still. And he didn't leave. He came at Brian Camp. He had tried every conceivable way to not do this. He had tried every conceivable way with his fists, by choking him, by feigning that he was going to shoot him twice, by hitting him over the head with things. And he was trying to avoid going near him again when at 12:40 of the 911 call, the dispatcher says, "Hey, where's Brian? And where's Jonathan? Can somebody check on him? Can you ask him where he shot him? Where did you shoot him? I don't know. I didn't examine it." He went in not because he wanted to go in. He went in because he was requested by the state police dispatcher. This is not a revenge situation. This is not a place where he wanted to be. This guy was getting up to the surprise of Brian Camp and was getting up near that barrel, near that gun, and nothing else had stopped this guy. And by the way, this is not a situation where the Commonwealth wants you to believe that he walked up to him, and as I said in my opening and as we heard, one of the first things was back of the head. It's not the back of the head. It's not an execution. It's the top of his head. From this side, where the last thing that apparently the Commonwealth wants Brian Camp, after all of this, in his own home, to get closer to Mr. Latender, and I believe, why didn't you kick him in the head? Or
We're hitting the pause button. I'm being told we need to take a break. We'll be right back live after this.
We want to understand the mindset behind your actions in this case.
To Moby in court this afternoon. The two sentences of life with the night and let him speak.
None of it. He's getting up. We now know why from the medical examiner. The only thing this guy was doing was trying to kill Brian Camp. The injuries and the exhaustion of Brian Camp at that point too. So I'm going to go over closer to him and whatever, kick him and stomp him. But I've already gotten my you-know-what kicked the entire time. My dominant hand is injured, my knee is hurt, my head is ringing, my eyes are poked. There was no stippling, as you heard. There was no gun impression. There was no gunpowder. It was from distance to stop this guy from killing him. The last subject that I'm going to touch on here, ladies and gentlemen, is the statement that Brian gave. And the judge already instructed you originally about statements and voluntariness and stuff, the humane practice. He told the operator, he told the 911 operator that he fired a second shot, close in time to when it happened, right after this encounter with this guy. He told him that. He now, between the end of this ordeal, and by the way, state police still not there, ambulance is still not there, they don't arrive for 2.5 more minutes. And here we are left. But after that, now Brian is the suspect. And between the time that he is taken off of the ground with his gun and he is brought to the barracks for this statement, you get to use your common sense and life experience as to what happens to a person under these circumstances. What happens to your brain after it's been slammed against the wall? What happens to your brain when it's been smashed by being punched or hit in the head with a gun barrel?
What happens to your brain on drugs?
When you are exhausted, when you hit your head on the floor when you fall. You did that downstairs. When you have a boxer's fracture to your right hand, your dominant hand is no longer good. He's got a busted knee. And now he is sitting in an ambulance. He starts in the cruiser, and then he sits in an ambulance. And the person that Brian Camp is the person who says, nope, I'm going to stay here so I can see my kids in the ambulance. And they don't let him see his kids. That would have an effect. He just shot somebody. That would have an effect. The trooper says, you've just had a traumatic experience. About 4 hours, I believe the math is, that he sits in the ambulance. They don't let him see his kids. Time goes by. Whatever's going on with his body, which I would suggest to you is only more and more pain. He finally goes to the hospital where he is treated. He's not given pain medication, and then they take him to the barracks. And when you pay close attention to the judge's instruction, the humane practice judge's instruction, the things that you take into consideration about a statement that is given by somebody to the police, the conditions and their condition.
I just want to reiterate something for transparency. When you hear those little spikes in the audio, the defense attorney is getting his legal pad close to the microphone. We place our microphones around the courtroom so we can hear the audio. And when he turns the pages there, it makes that rumbling sound. So that's what that is. We're so glad you're watching along with us at home. I want to bring in our law enforcement guest for some final thoughts before we hit a break. Manslaughter. Okay, so earlier you said you would say that this
we love to be long and to do this.
Vincent, they're making me all right. They're going to sue you.
Several trials across the country. Verdict: the arraignment in the court with the sentence killing her years. Right where
a traumatic experience, something to the effect of, more things will come back to you as time goes by. He says, I'm having trouble lining up, and I forget if it's A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3, but he's saying I'm having trouble lining that up. You can tell as this statement is going on, the state police are in communication with somebody else, probably at the scene. And Brian is sitting there, by the way, picking Jonathan Latender's blood off of his face as he's sitting there. They wouldn't let him have water in the ambulance. They wouldn't let him wash his face off as he's sitting there. You'll see it if you didn't see it already. He's sitting there with this guy's blood on him in the barracks when he's being questioned about what just happened. They know, ladies and gentlemen, you can hear they start to get information from the 911 call. They know he has said already, he told them. They know he has said that he has fired a second shot. You can tell they've heard the 911 or they've been told about the 911 because they start focusing on what is on the 911 call. And they knew that he went in to check on Jonathan Latender. He did not voluntarily go in. I mean, voluntarily, yes, but it was not his idea to go check on Jonathan Latender. The officer says, when you went back in to check on this guy, you didn't shoot again? They knew that he told the 911 operator that there was a second shot. They know that he's struggling. That's why they say traumatic experience. They don't tell him that he's already said that. And they continue to question him as if that doesn't exist, knowing that he's struggling. Ladies and gentlemen, as actually gone over the time, I would ask that you take into consideration these circumstances when the judge instructs you on the law. And I would suggest to you, ladies and gentlemen, that Brian Camp it was appropriate for him to use, well, know that he was going to die, and it was appropriate for him to use under the circumstances, under all of the circumstances, in the same circumstances as a reasonable person. The judge is going to tell you the Commonwealth has to prove 4 things didn't happen. They're not going to be able to do that because this was, under all of the circumstances, ladies and gentlemen, an appropriate use of deadly force. And I ask that you find Mr. Camp not guilty. Brian Camp is under.
All right, that was. Sorry, Babu. That was the defense closing. We are going to play the state closing on Friday, day after Thanksgiving. Probably normal time. Well, yeah, there's not probably going to be court. So I'd probably do it around 4 p.m. Eastern. I don't believe I'll be streaming tomorrow unless something comes up, but we'll see. Maybe I'll get bored. I really appreciate you guys being here, though. Hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving. And I will see you guys on Friday. Toodles.